This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Do you ever have a story that you just can't get out of your head?
One that you play the details of over and over with your friends?
Well, you've come to the right place. I'm Claire.
And I'm Susan.
And this is Justice Pending,
a weekly true crime podcast where we discuss tantalizing crimes with more questions than answers.
Thank you so much for joining me tonight. This is Justice Pending live from Grapevine, the Jennifer Harris story. So I'm joined by two special guests tonight. I'm your host, Claire Sanamaw, and I have Daryl Parker here, private investigator, as well as Barry Wernick, who is a member of Jennifer Harris's family. Thank you both for coming.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, of course.
So this is a case that has been a part of my true crime storytelling for about a decade. It is a case that I can remember coming across as a young reporter for CBS News, and it's still unsolved today. So Jennifer Harris was just 28 years old when she disappeared from her hometown of Bonham, Texas. And she was found a week later in the Red River. And at that time, her cause of death was not immediately apparent, but she was obviously the victim of homicidal violence. So I'm so honored to have a member of Jennifer's family here tonight who can tell us more about who she was before this terrible event and just kind of give us a picture of her life and not just her death. So Barry, can you tell us who was Jennifer Harris?
Well, Jennifer Harris was my wife's big sister. She was 3 years older. They couldn't be anything, I guess, more different than one another. Jennifer was a sort of crunchy granola, outdoorsy girl who had a master's in marine biology and really wanted to pursue that anything outdoors. She had been married to her sweetheart, her junior high school sweetheart. So from 7th grade on, she went to Stephen F. Austin. He was a year younger, and he followed her there. But at some point, they were just not. She had big dreams, and he really just kind of wanted to hang out, drink some beer, and have some cigarettes. Or, he had no ambition. And Jennifer got what she wanted, and if she didn't, well, she left. And this is a long-term relationship, someone that the families knew each other, because when you had when your boyfriend, girlfriend from 7th grade on, the families are family, even though they're not married. They eventually did get married. Well, the marriage didn't last, and they went their separate ways. At that time, Jennifer had met someone who had the same vision of opening up a wellness center. She was into nutrition and wellness. And this guy was, he wasn't your typical good old boy from Texas. He wasn't part of the Bonham community. Bonham is a small town, 10,000 people up in the Red River. It's Fannin County. It's the Fannin County seat. So it's the big city of Fannin County, 10,000 people, about an hour and 15 minutes northeast of Dallas. And he wasn't from there. He wasn't accepted and always looked upon as sort of not what is she doing with this guy? Because it turned out they didn't just start a wellness business together. They developed a relationship, a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. So that also didn't last.
Yeah.
and there was a good reason it didn't last. He wasn't necessarily a great guy. I mean, he was far from it. He had some issues and abusive issues, which also seems to be what her ex-husband also had. So she did suffer abuse from both. But she was a redhead, she was fiery, and she could take the abuse because she fought back all the time. Okay, she was really a strong person.
So
basically, what happened, let's take it to 2002 when she's 28 years old. And they're divorced. Rob Holman is her ex-boyfriend, and James is her new boyfriend. They break up, and in 2002, a little bit before then, she started a relationship with her ex-husband again. She wanted to move back to Bonham. So from that point, she had moved away. She wanted to move back to Bonham and renew that old relationship with her ex-husband, her lifelong boyfriend, sweetheart.
So it's really a tale of two relationships. You have Jennifer, who had Rob, who was her childhood sweetheart, her first husband, and she also had a newer relationship, on again, off again, with James. So Rob and James are the two key characters here for Jennifer. And when she is moving back to Bonham, she's much closer geographically to Rob, her first, husband. And James is in the area, but he's really more like in the Plano area. We're in Dallas, so people know the geography.
Frisco.
Yeah, Frisco, Plano. So a far cry from Bonham in Fannin County. So the geography kind of comes into play as we start to piece together what happened to Jennifer Harris. And so I want to bring in Daryl Parker here. So Daryl, tell everyone what you were doing when you first heard about the Jennifer Harris case.
So let's see. I think that was 2007, 2008. Her father, Jerry Harris, came to the Fannin County Sheriff's Office. At the time, I was a lieutenant at the Sheriff's Office, and he came into the office. I'd never heard of the case. No one ever told me about it. But he was upset, not overly, but he was like, I want to know what's going on. No one's talked to me in a while. I'd like to know what's happening with my daughter's case. And the sheriff didn't want to see him. I assume it's because he had made so many visits to the sheriff's office. The sheriff didn't have anything new to tell him. But I went out in the parking lot with him, and we talked for a little while. And as we talked, I learned that he had been a Marine. I was a Marine. And so I promised him that I would pull out the files. I would start taking a look at it, and I would try to get some answers.
So Jennifer's story really centers around a timeline. Like any good investigator, Daryl knows the timeline in this case down to the minutes. But for the broad strokes, we know that on the night when Jennifer disappeared, it was about 8 p.m. that she was last seen alive. She is in Bonham. She goes to a friend's house. It's Mother's Day weekend, y'all. So everyone is spending time with their family. They have specific memories of being with, at certain family members' houses. It's not just any random Sunday night. It's Mother's Day night. And so Jennifer tragically had lost her mother to cancer. And so she had been spending time with her grandmother, and she had expressed an interest in seeing her former in-laws, Rob's family, right? And we know from phone records that they did speak that morning. We do not have any records of Jennifer speaking with James. There's no phone records that they spoke that day. So that's interesting. She did speak with Rob, and as he will tell it, he told her that they couldn't meet. He was with his new girlfriend, and he was bringing her to meet his parents, and they were not going to take kindly to having the ex-wife present at the family gathering. And so that was, according to Rob, where they left things. But interestingly enough, we know that at 8 o'clock, Jennifer was visiting a friend in Bonham to get a recipe for chicken spaghetti. It's always stood out. Just the
Henny penny.
Henny penny.
That's what it's
Henny penny chicken spaghetti. Just the ordinary everyday, to think something like that. You just never imagine that could be a detail that people would associate with you, for the rest of your life. But so she goes to get this recipe, and then around 8:00, she tells her friend, "Oh, I have to go." And coincidentally or not, we know by Rob's own admission that around 8:00, he left his house that he shared with his girlfriend because they had just finished watching The Sopranos. And it was a rerun, right? So it was running in an earlier time slot. So it was finished at 8:00. I'm checking all these details, y'all.
I've got the TV guide from that year.
Yeah.
And it actually,
We can confirm. So he leaves his house around 8:00, tells his girlfriend that he wants to go driving. And as Rob tells it, he claims that he saw Jennifer on the road, and they basically exchanged the old Texas hi as they crossed the intersection, but they never met. So Daryl, do you want to tell us how Jennifer's vehicles discovered, when people start to realize that something is wrong? Because this is 2002. She didn't have a cell phone at this time, which wasn't that uncommon. So it takes a little while.
Yeah. So there's so much in there to unpack. It's not even funny, right?
Yeah.
So she leaves her friend's house at 8:00, a minute or two before. He leaves his house a minute or two before 8:00. He confesses that he sees her at this intersection. He sees her, but there's no interaction. Now, remember, they had an hour-long phone call in that morning, and they had argued about whether or not he was going to see her or not. Then it's a 7-minute drive to where her car was found. Locked, keys were gone and everything, so she obviously got out of her car and left with somebody that she knew. There's a person who was walking along the road, another witness, who passed where her vehicle was at within 1 minute of it being parked there. So, I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night, right? So he sees her at the intersection. 8 minutes later, she's gone with somebody that she knows. And that's the last time she was seen alive.
At a place where they would meet often as well.
Yes.
It has been confirmed, and people said that, yes, they would meet there. And actually, Rob admitted that was one of their meeting places, because they weren't going to meet in his house, which was where his, current wife and his girlfriend at the time, where they were living.
So it was over by the lake. There was a music venue, but it was closed that night. So there was no real reason to go there. You could say, the sun set, but by 8:00, the sun was down. So there was really the idea that this is a rendezvous is really the only thing that makes sense, that they were planning to meet up there. And that was something that we learned through interviews that many of Jennifer and Rob's friends gave to the police, was that was their custom, that they would go meet up on these back roads, park her car, she would jump in the truck with him so that they would have private time, and her car would be put away somewhere. So this car ends up getting towed because it's partially blocking the roadway. It's not a parking lot. It's not an official place to leave your vehicle. And so the vehicle being towed is the first indication that Jennifer's not where she's supposed to be.
Let me point out, too, that when I talk about how isolated this place was, this dance hall thing, I was a lieutenant in the sheriff's department in that county. I didn't know that it existed.
Well, just also to clarify, it was called the Hoedown, but it wasn't really a dance place. No drinking, no alcohol was served. It was, I think, one Monday every month. So the owner of the land there had this place, and he thought it'd be a great place to have like Monday night, like a church singing or gospel or just kind of that kind of music for just the community. But like young kids wouldn't go out there. Yeah. No, this was more for like,
because it was so isolated, this is not going to be a random person just driving around these back county roads and find this young woman sitting there on the side of the road with her thumb out, waiting for somebody to pick her up. Impossible.
So let's talk about the suspect theories in this case. We discussed how Jennifer went missing and her body was found 1 week later in the Red River. So at this point, she was completely naked, and her possessions, her keys, her purse, they've never been found. And so the suspect theories that developed were really three. Number one, her ex-husband, Rob. Number two, her ex-boyfriend, James. And number three, a serial killer drifter, right? Because you can't rule out when you don't have a definitive DNA evidence link, which her body was found in a fast-moving river. Unfortunately, to date, there have been no successful efforts to get a DNA profile from her body, even though there were nail clippings taken and there were other tools, that they use to take samples. They've never been able to get a DNA profile. So we have these three theories. So I would love to just take them one at a time and go through. Let's start with serial killer drifter. I think Daryl was starting about how unlikely that really would be. In my line of work in true crime television, when I worked at CBS News for 48 hours, I did a number of serial killer stories. The show that I'm working on now, it's called Killer Confessions, Case Files of a Texas Ranger. Check it out on HBO Max. And little shameless plug there. And we look at some serial killer cases where there actually was a serial killer driving a truck up and down 35 and kidnapping women, single women alone at night in their cars, would run across this man. And his name was William Reese, and he was very adept at getting women into his car with various ruses that he had. But I would like to point out that he worked on highly trafficked roads, the freeway, right? In roads that connected to the freeway. His hunting ground was really gas stations. This is the stuff of nightmares, but he would get to a gas station. He would just stalk the parking lot, and he would wait for an attractive woman to walk through that was alone, and then he would go to her car. He would disable her tire in some way, and then wait for her to get back in, and then follow her down the road. And when she pulled over, he would offer to help her change her tire. And what he would really do was take the tire iron and smack her in the back of the head, and then put her in his truck, and then they would be gone. So we know 4 women that he killed this way. And it was unbelievable. It does happen. The serial killer drifter is real.
How often, though, does someone have to go meet someone who's a serial killer that they don't know? And right. So this is sort of like, remember, she was at her friend's house where when she said, it's almost 8 o'clock, I got to go. I got to meet someone. Well, who is she meeting? You meet someone you know. You don't meet someone you've never planned on meeting.
Right.
So, and to Barry's point, if she was going from her friend's house to meet someone at a gas station or a truck stop or a McDonald's or Walmart, whatever, there is that possibility that a serial killer could be stalking that area. That's fine. But if she went from her friend's house to this very isolated place out on this county road, it's got to be the dumbest serial killer in history, because the chances of running into someone by chance out there it's astronomical.
Remote, to say the least. Okay, so the serial killer drifter theory is one that comes up that people say you can't disprove it. I kind of feel like we have, but
well, there's also the hound dogs, and they didn't see her being walking off any further than from a car to another car. Yeah. To get out.
It's true.
No sign of struggle.
There was a K-9 unit dispatched to where her car was found, and they didn't pick up a scent anywhere of her traveling by foot. So the idea that she would have hitchhiked and her car was not immobilized in any way. It was a functioning car, so she didn't have a reason to abandon it. So let's talk about James. So James was the ex-boyfriend, and he has a record of domestic violence. He does have a history of violent behavior, including strangulation, allegations of strangulation from Jennifer and from other women in his life. I will tell you that his ex-wife, Cindy, has reached out to me since the podcast came out to express her deep fear that her ex-husband, James, is responsible for Jennifer's death. That is her worst fear. And she has memories of James thinking out loud about how he would get away with the perfect murder, and that he just needed the chance to pull it off. And so she is haunted by this, and it's another theory because James did have a romantic relationship with Jennifer, a business relationship with Jennifer, and there's just a lot of history there. So do you want to talk about James's alibi, Barry?
Sure. Well, I mean, think about it. There, and you also have, is there motive there? Their business relationship, their business partnership failed. The spa went under. So did their romantic relationship. So it's sort of like, okay. And now she wants to get back with her ex-husband. Now, does he know that that's what she's doing? No. But maybe he did. Well, when offered by the authorities, law enforcement, to take a lie detector test, he said absolutely, and he took it. And he passed it. In fact, he said he had an alibi. And his alibi actually came in, said he was there with him. And over an hour away from where this took place. So they were in Frisco.
Eating at a McDonald's restaurant after a day of roofing was the alibi.
And you know what's great is McDonald's and all these places have cameras, right, to confirm that alibi. So even if you don't believe the alibi, well, you got the cameras. Law enforcement, the Keystone cops, decided not to check it until like a month later, but it kind of re-records over itself every couple of days, right? They should have gone after that right then to really secure that alibi. But
nobody knew that it was potentially evidence in a murder case, that it could be key alibi corroboration. And unfortunately, no one went to that McDonald's and asked them to preserve or ordered them to preserve that tape. And so by the time authorities got there, the evidence had disappeared. All they had was the word of James and of his friend that he was eating with.
And he may, any one of us could be a murderer. We don't know, but does it mean that you murdered someone else? Does it mean you murdered this person? If you're in Frisco and she's in Bonham, that's kind of hard to do.
It's hard to do. It's especially hard to find someone without a cell phone on a backcountry road after dark. So there's a lot of challenges. It's not impossible. I looked into what James's familiarity was with the area. As Barry had said, he's not local. He's not from there. There were occasions where he had gone, I believe, four-wheeling with the family, in the area, but it wasn't the level of, they know these roads like the back of their hand, right? Which is what the local boys do. And it is a common practice to go out for a drive in the country. There's not much to do. You have a nice chest of beer, and that's your entertainment for the night. So that particular habit fits more with Rob than with James. But, we gotta take stock of everybody. So let's talk about Rob, Daryl.
Can I say something about James?
Yeah,
first?
please.
Okay. So James as a suspect, there's a lot of things that kind of take him off the table. We have the alibi, and we actually have two witnesses. We have the guy that he was roofing with. We also have that guy's wife. because that night they drove to the guy's house because his kids had to get to bed and all that other kind of stuff before James left, right? So James took him home to his house. His wife also, that's how he got home, was James took him home. So we have two witnesses. The other thing is that she did not have a cell phone, and I don't know if James had one. So the only way he could contact her is to either go see her in person, send a carrier pigeon, or call her grandmother's house. And we looked at all the phone records from Grandma's house, and there were no calls to him. They had been broken up for about three to 4 weeks. So she had been living with Grandma for 3 or 4 weeks and had had no conversation with him, at least within the last 2 weeks. So how, on the night she disappeared, she would have arranged to meet with him with no form of communication. Now, some person with a conspiracy could say, well, she told her friend to call James, and the friend had a cell phone, or the friend called. Okay, that's possible. Highly unlikely. And even more unlikely that he would find his way to the hoedown by himself to meet her there.
And that a friend would have kept quiet about this all this time whenever Jennifer turned up dead, right?
Yeah. Okay, Rob now?
Yeah, let's go to Rob.
Okay.
Let's go to Rob
Let's
now.
talk about Rob. I'm going to disagree with something you said at the very beginning, because you said this case was still unsolved. This case is not unsolved. This case is solved. This case is not prosecuted. That's the difference.
That is it. In fact, it was solved, I believe, the moment they interviewed Rob in his own interview.
Yeah.
Done by his uncle, who was the investigator for the Bonham Police Department.
Yeah.
It really puts a very clear light on why there was never a indictment or a grand jury once you know that the lead investigator for the Fannin County Sheriff's Department or the Bonham Police Department was actually the lead suspect's uncle. And he did not leave the force until pretty recently. It was like 2021 or 2018.
And he's since passed away.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, and that's where Daryl's point about it hasn't been prosecuted, because if anyone watches any of the interviews that they did with Rob, you would say, that's your man. It's obvious. The lying, the going back and forth. We can give examples of this.
He has always maintained his innocence.
If your lead,
important to say.
But if your lead investigate, you try to figure out, well, why didn't they ever do something? Now they could say, well, we just don't want to mess up. If we mess up, then the guy could get away. So we want to make sure we have all the evidence. That's an excuse. It's pretty damning, especially they'll say, well, we don't have DNA evidence. Circumstantial evidence is evidence. And there's plenty of it. And I would say there's some admission. I would take it as an admission by him of being the only one who had the motive and opportunity to do it. And you want to get to the motive?
Yeah, let's talk about the motive. We've left a big secret out there.
Yeah. So the motive, so Jennifer wanted to get back with Rob. That was her goal, right? They were still meeting and they were still being intimate with each other. He was not telling his fiance that, of course, because he figured that would be the end of that relationship. But she kept trying to draw him back in, and that was her goal. That's admitted. And then she tells Rob that she's pregnant. Okay. And Rob says, well, I don't believe it. That's not possible, because she had endometriosis. So it was difficult for her to conceive, right? That was the thing. So he sort of didn't believe her because of that reason. That's what he says. But at the same time, he offered to pay for an abortion. And she said, no, I'm keeping it, yada, yada. So finally she got down to the point and said, okay, here's an ultimatum. You're either going to tell your girlfriend and your family, or I'm going to tell her. And she ends up dead.
Just a few weeks later, she ends up dead. She told a friend this and confided in her that not only was she pregnant, not only was it Rob's, but that she was keeping the baby. And despite his wishes, she was not going to have an abortion, and that she was going to announce to everyone that this was Rob's baby. And his own admission in the interview with his uncle is that this will ruin his life if she's going to have this baby.
It'll ruin his life again. So it wouldn't be, and then he said, it doesn't make me look good here because I don't have an alibi. Now it's interesting.
Yeah. So
his only alibi was that he was driving around the backwoods that night when he left, when The Sopranos ended, the show ended, that he was driving around drinking beer for 5 hours.
By himself.
He
said that he went to see a couple buddies, no one was home. He didn't stop at a gas station. He didn't go anywhere else. No one laid eyes on him until about 2 a.m, whenever he got home to his girlfriend's house. And she remembered him coming in at that time. Now, at that time, Rob was working as a landscaper, which is an early morning job. And so the idea that he would be out until 2 a.m, before going to work Monday morning was a bit unusual.
What do you think of the fact that he's worried about not having an alibi when no one knew where Jennifer was? She hadn't been found yet. No one knew that she was dead. No one knew that she was murdered. But he's worried about an alibi.
He referred to it as an alibi when she was still a missing person. So there were quite a few interesting choices of words that Rob made that have been picked apart and discussed and analyzed. If you're enjoying this discussion, you should know that the three of us, plus Jennifer's sister, Alyssa, did an entire season of Final Days on Earth on this case. A deep dive, 12 episodes about every nitty-gritty twist and turn in this case and every theory. So this was the broad strokes. I'll let Daryl give any final thoughts, and then Barry, and then we'll open it up for questions.
So I want to start real quick with a little bit of my background. So I was in the Marine Corps for 21 years where I was an investigator. Then I became a police officer in Texas where I was an investigator. And then I've been a private investigator for probably 10, 12 years now. So I've been doing this for a long time. I've done a lot of criminal cases. And it's my position that a defense investigator knows more about a case than anyone else on the planet, because I get to see everything the police did. I get to do my own investigation, and I also get to talk to the defendant. I get to talk to the family. I get more information than anyone else does. So at the time a case goes to trial, I know more than the judge. I know more than the jury will ever hear, and I know more than both the prosecutor or the defense counsel. I know all of that. So I think a defense investigator is probably in the best position to judge the truth of a case, right? But we don't get to do that. I will tell you
except on a podcast.
I will tell you that in this case, so I work criminal defense almost exclusively at this point. And I can tell you that I have seen dozens and dozens and dozens of people go to prison with less evidence than this case has.
I mean, it's true. You are looking to exonerate people who are charged with these crimes.
Yeah.
Are you able at all to exonerate Rob Holman as much as you've tried? Is there any way that you can exonerate?
So there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. What is that? Is it 99%? Is it 92%? It's each individual juror has to decide what that percentage is, right? I can tell you, though, that without the exception of something absolutely strange, like the serial killer who maybe that was grandma's place that he went to, I don't know. Somehow he knew it. Outside of that, no, it's not possible for this to have been anyone else other than Rob Ford or Rob Holman.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the more interesting details in this case, from my perspective, is that before this murder, before Jennifer was murdered, Rob worked as a landscape person. He worked manual labor jobs. His girlfriend at the time was a teacher, taught social studies, right? After Jennifer's murder, they have since both become therapists dealing in trauma. And I just have to psychoanalyze that. Rob's profile talks about how he brings a sense of calm to even the most stressful situations. And I just can't imagine how you can go from one career to the next like that without a significant trauma of your own. You might say the violent murder of your ex-wife who was carrying your baby, or you might say that you were the person who perpetrated that and that caused great trauma for you and you're still working that out. So competing theories on why he went into trauma therapy, but it is fascinating to me.
Let me add one more thing. So he plays his games, I play my games. I got the case in 2000 and whatever it was, 2010, 11.
10, that's right.
Yeah. And I learned what happened, yada, yada. Her body was disposed of in the Red River, right? It's a very muddy body of water. So when I went to go interview, I was still a lieutenant at the sheriff's office. I went to go interview him at his house. I had visited her grandmother's house and gone through some of her things, and I found all these pictures of them together. So I got about 10 of them together and went to Rob's house and knocked on the door and introduced myself, asked him if I could talk to him. And I said, hey, by the way, these are some pictures that were in her room. Her grandmother said you could keep them if you wanted to. And I said, but first, could you put these in order for me, chronological order? And I had intentionally picked one where they were swimming in a muddy body of water. It was Lake Natchitoches. And I had inserted it in there. And as he fanned the pictures out, he immediately picked that one out and stared at it for a very uncomfortable 10 seconds. 10 seconds is a long time. And he was just staring at it. And then he finally told me, oh, yeah, that was at Lake Natchitoches. And he didn't realize or didn't see that I really wasn't interested in him putting them in chronological order. I just wanted to see his reaction to that photograph. And I got the reaction I was looking for.
Fascinating, Daryl. Barry, final thoughts?
Well, final thoughts is I'm hopeful. But before I even get there, I want to thank you, Claire, for taking this on from the very beginning when you were at CBS and promoted this. And you were so upset with the way they wouldn't give a lot of the, and you said, look, I'm going to start a new career in podcast, true crime podcast.
Really was.
And I said, if there's anyone, Alyssa and I, my wife and I said, if there's anyone that we will allow to do anything with this, it would be you. And so I appreciate that. And also Final Days on Earth, the Jennifer Harris story. You have to listen to it because it is so well done. I've told so many people to watch it that it's.
Thank you, Barry.
And I also think that it should be used, just to back up. I'm an attorney, but also a filmmaker. And we started this process of it reopening this investigation, not the law enforcement officers, but us doing it, the family doing it. Because my wife said to me, come on, you make films. We can make a docuseries, at least leave something behind for my sister that shows who she really was, because there's all these online things. That's when I reached out to Daryl, because I knew from my father-in-law that he was the only guy that took this seriously. So Daryl and I went and started retracing the steps, doing our docuseries, investigating and interviewing people, and we've held that back. We haven't produced it, edited until we get a conviction. We don't want it to mess with any possible conviction. And this past year, a new sheriff was elected and a new DA was elected. So it's been now over a year. I reached out, congratulated both, and said, when you have the time, let's get together and let's hit this hard. And what are we going to use? We're going to use this Final Days on Earth as that's all you need to look at, because Claire did such an amazing job putting the story together and all the evidence. And well, it's been a year. I haven't heard back. Doesn't mean I'm not optimistic. I know they had to clear the whole.
Yeah.
I was just telling you before tonight that give them a year. They're cleaning out the whole house. They're getting all new prosecutors. They're getting all in the DA's office, the sheriff's office, cleaning it all out. It's all new. So now that I've given them that time, I called both of them today, and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
But
There's
I
no
think
statute of limitations
there's no
on murder.
statute of limitations, and I really do seriously believe if they sit down and listen to this, because once they start listening to Final Days on Earth that you did, they will not stop. I mean, this is one of those binge things, but they will take notes, and I think there's no way they won't go after this for fear of, oh, what if we lose a case? And so, no, I'm very hopeful.
And the way to do that is to just throw it in front of a grand jury.
You're getting an indictment.
The DA doesn't have to make the decision and take all the responsibility.
Right.
Hey, we put it in front of the grand jury. They're the ones that decided. Let's prosecute it.
Thank you both so much. I'd love to open it up to questions. If anyone has a question about this case, about Jennifer's case, about anything true crime related, we'd be happy to entertain them.
Have you heard anything from Rob?
So her question is, have you heard anything from Rob? Yes. I'm a journalist, so I always reach out to everyone. And so I reached out to Rob through his job at the time as a trauma therapist. I sent a snail mail letter to his office, and to his credit, he called me. I got the phone call. I was driving, and so was he. So I couldn't record the call, but he did thank me for letting him know that there was going to be a podcast about this and for giving him the opportunity to speak. He told me that he did not want to speak on the record. And what I remember him saying was, I don't know anyone who's ever said, boy, I sure am glad I talked to that reporter. So that was the extent of our conversation. He and his wife have since moved out of state since the podcast came out. And that is the closest to a victory we might have had so far, if you want to call it that, just in terms of having some kind of movement. People talk about how the victims of these crimes, they're the ones who pay the most. And the fact that Jennifer's family continues to suffer the consequences of someone else's action who has not paid for their crimes is unfathomable. Yeah.
I've heard from his attorney. And my response was, sue me. Sue me. I dare you. Because if we go into court, he sues me, they're gonna ask me why you said this, why you said that, and I'm gonna lay it all out, and I'm gonna say, prove me wrong. And he's gonna have to get into a court of law, and he's gonna have to respond as well. So
he would have to be deposed.
He would have to be deposed. So
one thing we didn't mention was, we told you James took that lie detector test. Rob didn't and wouldn't.
Yeah.
Actually, James took that polygraph. It was either 2 times or 3 times. Yeah. And every single time that law enforcement contacted him over the years, which included the Texas Rangers, he fully cooperated.
He showed up anywhere, anytime that they asked him to. Now, his ex-wife, Cindy, will say that that's a challenge. In her view, she sees it as a sick cat and mouse game, and that he can't resist getting to show off how skilled he was and how he's the super criminal. This is just to put out the another theory, but that is her theory on why he's able to pass all these polygraph exams.
I haven't heard from him, but I did hear from his wife, who sent me a cease and desist on this docuseries.
Oh, Rob's wife. Yeah.
Oh, yes, Rob Holman's wife. And it was in production. We had a Vimeo. I have no idea where they got wind of this, but we had a Vimeo back and forth with our editing team and production, and someone left off the password, and they saw that we were looking at Rob, James, and Rob's wife, because maybe Rob and his wife were involved, or maybe whatever. So we're trying to figure out, and you put all these people out there. So it's interesting because I didn't get a cease and desist from Rob's attorney. I got it from his wife's attorney. Of course, we put the password back on. We're like, whoa, thank God. It was like, there were very few views. I mean, it wasn't out there on, but so we did.
Any other questions?
So was he ever arrested? Or just question?
Just questioned. He was questioned, before her body was found. He was questioned he was just questioned, right? A person of interest and I would say he fell into the category of a person of interest. He was never named as a suspect, but I can tell you the red flags from his interview. There's he has at least, 3 or 4 what we consider to be knowledge statements, knowledge answers. So, for example, the first thing that he said when he was told that they found Jennifer in the river, what do you think that was? What do you think the first thing you would say if someone said, hey, she was found? How about, was she naked? That was his first question.
And she was.
She was naked.
Well, that's why.
So that's the point, is that is an indicator of criminal foreknowledge, right? Why would you ever ask that? So there are a number of things like that he did that were he knows. He knows.
When he was questioned by his uncle, the lead investigator, he was asked, what about the baby? And Rob said, what baby? Jennifer's baby. Oh, that baby.
He hangs his head
when
he realizes.
that they knew. Oh, well, that wasn't my baby. Oh. Then why did you offer to pay for her abortion? And his response was, well, that's just the kind of nice guy I am. I do those things. He didn't say nice guy, but he said, well, those are the things I did for her.
Yeah.
I would pay.
He would take care of everything.
I took care of, that's right. He's such a nice guy. So.
Did they say what the cause of death was, or you said it wasn't able to because of the murder?
So when they find someone, 6 days in the water do a lot to the body, right? She had, the body had been damaged by, fish, turtle, birds, that kind of thing. And so that can kind of hide things. It was listed as homicidal violence. So when you find a healthy 28-year-old female naked, so all of her clothes have been taken off and so on and so forth, you can say, now, I'm going to say it was either strangulation or blunt force trauma. She had marks on her body. You don't bruise, you can, but typically you don't bruise after death. And her right eye was this just swollen mass. That happened before she died. And so she was hit very hard on her right temple, her right eye. And so I think she was probably knocked unconscious and put in the water, and she drowned.
And one of the interesting details in the timeline is that she didn't have water in her lungs. So she was dead before she went into the water, which is also key because at one point when she was missing, there were conversations, mostly from Rob and his side of the family, that she potentially could have committed suicide. She could have wanted to end her life. And even after she was found, they tried to claim that she would have jumped into the river to her death. Jennifer was a certified lifeguard. She was a strong swimmer. And pregnant women don't typically kill themselves, nor do they strip naked before jumping into a river.
Strip naked and walk 12 miles from their Jeep, but there's no tracks, so maybe she flew to
it's quite far-fetched, but
to the river. Yeah.
So where she was found in the Red River, typically a body will end up in a river system, will typically end up about 2 miles from where it was put into the water, right? Not always, but that's a general rule. 2 miles, it was actually 1.8 miles. 1.8 miles put her right at a campground. It was a primitive campground that had the only ramp down to the water on the Red River for several miles in either direction. So we believe that's where she was put in the water. Well, that also happened to be that campground had a little caretaker's cottage right at the very beginning of it. Nobody lived there. That night, it burned down. Her purse was never found. Her keys were never found. Her clothes were never found.
Actually, the week before, she went to Austin to visit her sister, Alyssa, my wife, and she was excited about the prospects of being with Rob, that maybe this will happen. Maybe they'll get back together and do it right. And she went and bought a CD, Reckless Kelly, live at Stubbs. She knew that was his favorite band. Bought that CD for for Rob to give it to him when she went back to Bonham. And it just so happens their grandma, Mimi, saw on the breakfast table the Reckless Kelly CD that night that that Jennifer left to get the recipe for Henny Penny. So where is that CD?
It's never been found. And it's also interesting, one of the tips that I got after the podcast came out, someone reached out to say that they had remembered seeing remembered seeing Rob and his girlfriend at a Reckless Kelly concert shortly after Jennifer's death.
So when she went that night, that CD that was on that breakfast table, she took that with her. Is she going to give that to a drifter, serial killer? She out James? No. She didn't give it to her friend who was helping her with the Henny Penny recipe, and they were watching Stepmom at the time that Rob was watching The Sopranos. But no, that CD can't be found.
And apparently is still one of his favorite bands, which is, it's a whole lot of details that just kind of add up there. Any other questions? Thank you so much for coming out. Oh, there's one back there. Go ahead.
What else does Daryl have that's how he does to Rob? What evidence do you have?
Well, there's
And where is he at now?
he's up in Washington State.
Washington or Colorado?
I think he was in Washington State,
Okay.
but
He may have moved.
he may have moved again, practicing his trauma counseling. So there's a lot to put together. You know, the amount of time that we have here. So, for example, the timeline. The timeline is solid. It's one of the most solid timelines I've ever put together in a case. I know to the minute when these things happen, right? By his own admission, he's the last person to see her alive at that intersection. 7 to 8 minutes later, she disappears, confirmed by a person that was walking down the road. And this is also triangulated with a rainstorm that happened that night. We know exactly when the rain started falling. We know where this person was on the road, all of that. And I'll tell you something about that person. That person saw Jennifer Harris and Rob Holman pass her on the road. That person knows the Holman family. Now, I went to interview her 3 times, twice as a lieutenant with the sheriff's office and once later as a private investigator. Her daughter was even on the cheerleading squad with Jennifer. And still, she said, nothing's going to bring that girl back. She's gone, and I know the family, meaning the Holman family. What is it she didn't want to tell me? She didn't want to tell me that Jennifer Harris passed her in the Jeep, and then Rob Holman passed her in his black truck. That person right there she has the key to the whole case, but she's a very selfish, evil person, and she's not going to give us that information.
What you'll hear from a lot of people is, that person will get their just desserts and, after they die.
And so we also have a lot of action that happened after Jennifer disappeared. You know, he gets talked to by the police, and the first thing he says was, "I'm afraid because I don't have an alibi." You know, who comes up with that? Who comes up with, was she naked? Who comes up with, his activities at the funeral, his actions at the funeral? While the search for Jennifer's body was going on, him prompting the family all the time for information. What did the police say? What did the police say? What did the police say? His refusal to cooperate with the police. His refusal to take a polygraph. And we're not in a court of law, polygraph, you can't. Well, guess what? A polygraph is admissible. A lot of people don't know that. It is admissible if both sides agree to admit it. But you're never going to get that. You're never going to get the prosecution and the defense to say, yeah, let's put the... So that's why they don't use it. But it is admissible. But he refused to take one. He refused to talk to law enforcement in any meaningful way. When I went to see him at his house as a lieutenant, and I said, I'd like to interview you about this, he called me later on that night and said, okay, I'll interview with you. So he met me the next morning at the sheriff's office with his attorney. I went through about 70 questions with him, and he answered all my questions. And of course, I was going to confront him with the consequences of his actions. I had pictures of Jennifer and at the crime scene. And he knew what was happening, because as soon as I started to open that folder, he jumped up and said, no, I don't want to see her like that. You didn't want to be confronted with what you did. And I mean, I could, if I had it here in front of me, I could tell you all the details about everything that points to Rob, as opposed to, for example, James Harris. James Hamilton. James Hamilton. There are other things. No one spotted him in Fannin County, not even in the county. He was an hour and something away. What else about Rob?
Man, there's so much. Just that.
Oh, sorry. You talked about the abuse in the marriage. We're not talking about light abuse. We're talking about choking. We're talking about, smashing walls and throwing her around the room and that kind of thing.
Yeah, Jennifer asked Alyssa if a husband can rape a wife, because that's what she thought was happening. And of course, Alyssa said, absolutely.
So
there's definitely a lot more to this case, and we would love to talk another time about it. But thank you so much for coming out tonight, and we will stick around and meet you. And I have some books here if anyone wants one, and I'll be happy to sign some books. And thanks again for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Justice Pending is recorded in Dallas, Texas for Rebel Studios. It's hosted by me, Claire Sanama, and Susan Passoni. Our theme music is Bending Truth, licensed at premiumbeat.com. We appreciate all listener feedback. Leave a review wherever you're listening right now, and we might read it on the air. Thanks for joining us.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.